What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Get a Grip with Kay. We are back in action with part 2 of this series, this one and only person that I've needed a 3-part series with so far. Not surprising, but welcome back to the show, Shelby Murphey.
Hi.
Hello. We're in my mom's house today, actually, of all places, which if you guys are watching the video, you will see a myriad of things behind us. And we're very vibey. There's plants. We've got meditative things. We've got mandalas. So we're going to get some good content out of Shelby today because we're really vibing. So as you guys know, when we start, if you haven't listened to episode 1 already, make sure you guys go listen to it because I always ask people in the very beginning 2 questions, right? I ask them what it means for them to have a grip on their life. And then the second thing I ask is them to tell the 10-minute version of their life story.
Which happened to turn into the first part of our entire podcast together.
It became part 1.
Yeah.
It became part 1. But honestly, that is an episode you have to listen to either before or after this one. But make sure you guys get that one in because Shelby talks a lot about like balancing the infinite versus the finite. We talk a lot about like her life journey with like homeschooling versus jiu-jitsu, like just a lot.
Being a kid growing up in jiu-jitsu and now teaching kids jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of people that it can...
Yeah, it touches a lot of lives and we've gotten so much good feedback on that episode. So again, 3 parts, but we're coming back today for part 2. And the part 2 that we're going to talk about today is really one of the most recent upswings of things, which is your journey into the 2023 World Championships, which is in June. So only a couple months ago, where you not only smashed it and won your division, but you also got your black belt on the podium. So my question for you today to start us off is from what I understand, your journey to the world stage was a little different than usual. And you had some things to combat with that you haven't had to deal with before. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the journey to Worlds?
Okay, so Journey to Worlds is going to be kind of similar to like my life story journey. It's just kind of, picking up where we left off. That's almost how it feels to me because I always think of jiu-jitsu as my entire life. So if I'm competing or I'm training, everything is kind of just a snapshot of what the current situation is. So any other part of my life is kind of encapsulated in that tournament day. Is how I view it. And specifically with my tournament footage, I really feel like from one tournament to the next, let's say if there's one in April and then another one in like June, it's like that those 2 different performances are just showing everything leading up to that before the one before. So like if you can visualize what I mean by that, it's just like, let's say if there's a 2-month gap and then I'm going into like the actual day of the tournament, it feels like everything that happens throughout that day and all the little, just the little things that happen or like just the way I'm interacting with people or obviously the big thing that happens, like the actual results, all is kind of just leading up from like those 2 months prior.
We've got a dog in here as well.
I don't even know if they could see her, but maybe they could just see her tail.
We've got dogs happening. We just you keeping it real.
Sweetheart. She's like, oh, you're talking about interesting stuff. She was cute. She's like, like this.
She was cute.
So I always like for me, jiu-jitsu is just how I'm becoming a better person, and it's what I occupy all of my time with. So every time I am competing, it means so much more to me than just the actual day. It's really just the lead up into it. So I'm just going to go into when I really feel like the energy of Worlds started to unfold, which is actually October 2022. So I feel like my entire from October 2022 to June 23 was my lead up to Worlds
prep. Yeah.
So what happened in October is I got injured. It was actually my first tournament at brown belt. I got my brown belt like a month before that. I did my first tournament, and at that tournament, something was kind of like set off with my knee. It wasn't even like about the fight. It was just just an accumulation of just overuse and like undercare, basically is the way I described it. But I was out for 3 months with that. So I was only training again in January, so I had to skip Europeans. So for those of you who maybe are in different circuits or aren't fully like immersed in jiu-jitsu competition, there's a few different like seasons that different athletes are on. Like Kendall, like you're on more of like an ADCC track, so like all your tournaments and stuff are kind of more towards
around that big event.
Or like when you're doing trials, it's kind of in like the later part of the year, and like if you're doing stuff that's like ADCC rule set specific, like you're trying to keep it kind of in the same rule set. So since like what I'm doing is like for Worlds, IBJJF Worlds, kind of that season from January to June is the biggest thing of the year. So when I wasn't able to do Europeans in January, it was shocking.
Well, it's a hard start to the season, right? Because when you think about those first the 6 months of the year, like you're saying, for most gi competitors that are competing in IBJJF, which is our highest level competitors, all the majors are in one part of the year. You got Europeans, Pan Ams, Brazilian Nationals, and then Worlds, right? And so with all of those together, to miss one of the 4 majors in the very beginning is a really rough start to your season. It's one thing. It's one thing if it's planned, right? Like if someone's like, "Oh, I'm not going to do Europeans this year," but if have it taken out, like that affects the rankings. It affects how you're competing against the people you know you're going to be fighting later on in Worlds, and also just the energy of going into like Pans or Brasileiros as the European champion is a really big deal. Plus, you've won Europeans before.
Yeah,
right?
I had done Europeans. I might have to get fact checked on this. I think for the like 3 years in a row and one every year.
Yeah.
So this was like basically from my first like juvenile one, so like actually getting into like being a competitive jiu-jitsu like person who's doing real tournaments, not just like kid tournaments. I did every single year. So this was like my 4th year in the like adult division.
Yeah.
And then my first year not doing European. So that was devastating. Everyone leaves for Europe. I'm here alone. And I will also mention that knee injury, when I tried to come back from that, also then morphed into neck injuries and back injuries and just everything, because I was like coming into it way too fast. I'd never actually had an injury that had taken me out for like a few months like that. So I just tried to like bulldoze my way back into it. And that was hard too. So hard on my body, hard on my mind, very difficult, like the most difficult time of my life, which I didn't even fully like realize while I was in it, which is something that I know you can totally relate to, because we will just push and like we just have so much love and effort to give that even if the intention behind the actions changes, we're so dedicated to what that action means to us that we don't recognize that there's been a shift and we need to like step back with the action.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in slowing down and taking inventory of like, how am I actually feeling? What am I am I automated? Am I on autopilot? Am I just going through the things that I feel like? When you're in that space of being injured, you wake up every day and you're like, what can I do today to get me closer to my goals? So yes, the actions change, and yes, you're involved in the changing part of the process, but a lot of the times we don't check in with ourselves, and it's like, wait, how am I actually feeling about what is going on? Like, I'm just continuing to keep the goal the same, but I can't always keep the goal the same when my everyday life is changing. But like you said, when you're one of those driven people, you want to keep the goal the same no matter what. It's actually not honoring a lot of the time for me, like what's true for me in that moment. Like maybe the goal does need to change, or at least needs to move or like shift a little bit. So it's easy to get lost in that when you don't check in with yourself on those things.
Yeah, and then also being able to recognize that your goal needs to shift is one thing that I feel like you and I can both say, yeah, that needs to shift, but then to try to think like, well, it's okay that that's shifting right now, and then maybe it will shift again. Like not projecting that shift as like an end all be all, because I think for me, I'm someone who just goes so deep into anything I do. If I'm training, I'm going into it all the way. If I have a competition coming up, all the way. If I'm focusing on teaching, like I dive so deep. When you're so deep into what you're doing, it can be really hard to like look around and realize you have to kind of like get yourself out of the hole and then shift and then go down another one and then come back up. Like you just want to keep digging down the same hole, which is funny that I use the word digging because of that thing you just put up on, you put up a story on your Instagram saying something about like just digging for the love to dig, or like playing the game just for the love of like playing, you know, like digging, playing, kind of like just the same thing. But I think that was on my mind.
Like just like being in the enthusiasm of digging whatever you're digging today, and not having to attach it to what it's going to be tomorrow, or not feeling like it's not enough today because there are more holes to dig. It's like, no, but today I'm digging this hole and I love it. Like I'm enthusiastic about it. Yeah.
And now that I think about it, I feel like for me, because my enthusiasm for just the action runs so deep, it carries itself longer than it might actually be there. So it's almost like if I'm training for something, but then I have to like if I'm going all the way in on my training, I'm very enthusiastic about that. It's like, because it's so intense, even if the real enthusiasm is like gone, I can still carry myself with like the past. So
yeah, it's
that's
like
why
the residual, like it's momentum. Like
yeah,
you've built enough
totally,
momentum.
the
I think you've
momentum.
built enough momentum for yourself over a lifetime of chasing one thing that even when it wavers a little bit, like you can still keep it pushing forward. But what happens?
Sometimes what
yeah.
I'm learning is that isn't always like it's taking you into a past.
Yeah,
it's not like
yeah.
really staying present with
it's
what's best.
Yeah, like when you have a path carved and you have momentum around that path, your momentum can keep pushing you down the same path. But if you don't ever stop and like look at the carved path and be like, wait a second, I carved this years ago. I don't actually know if this carving is still true today, but because it's so ingrained in the pattern, like I'm going to keep going on the pattern because I built up this energy and momentum. But what if I were able to zoom out and be like, okay, what is true for me today? Is it time to start carving something different? Or maybe I get to now carve multiple avenues, and sometimes I can jump into that path, and then sometimes I want to go a little to the right, and sometimes. So tell us what happened, like when you're sitting watching Europeans and you're like, okay, I had this one path that I had carved for me, and now I didn't even choose to go out of this carving. Like I was ripped out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just devastated.
Mm.
I don't even know how else. Like, it's just absolute devastation. I was competing before my injury. I was competing like once every 2 weeks. Like I hadn't lost for like 2 years straight, and I wasn't competing. So it's not like I lost my winning streak, but it felt like it didn't actually matter if I had a winning streak or not. That kind of like that meant nothing to me. But the energy that I felt every day, being in that flow that allowed me that streak was lost. So that was gone because I hadn't been training.
In the striving of it, like when you're in the striving of having a goalpost and you're reaching the goalpost and then you get a new one and a new one and a new one, it is really, really electric. And so oftentimes, like we've shared this off camera before, but when the goalpost is taken away, like you're kind of left with this, like the ashes of the fire now. And you're like, okay, I have this fire, but I don't really feel it because there's no thing to strive for, which is really powerful in a lot of ways because it makes you sit and feel like, okay, where do I want to put this fire if I can't put it there? Like, I think it's actually really important to be able to slow down and be like, if I didn't have this, who am I? Like, what am I without this? You know, not that you're never going to go back to having it again. It's something I tell myself. Like I'll literally say with myself and be like, Kendall, don't worry. Like, you're going to go back to having that feeling of competing, like doing all of these things at some point. But who are you without that? Because you're not always going to be that. There are things that are going to change it all the time. So it's pretty important that you don't wait until you're 35 and 40 or whatever, however old people are when they retire.
Yeah.
And like then
or the number you've decided for what age you should retire.
And then figure it out. So it's really valuable. Like you were 19 at the time to have to sit with that uncomfortability.
Yeah. Well, spoiler alert, like I feel like when I was watching Europeans, like you said, and I was thinking about that stuff, the answer to like, oh, what am I if I'm not doing this was not a good answer. It was like, I am like the worst. Like I don't like myself at all.
Yeah. Where's the value? There's nothing.
Yeah, there's no value. And I'm not saying no value to myself because also a part of me is very tied to my mission and I always feel like I can get back to that mission. But at that point, it was like, if I'm not on the mission, then there is no value because I'm so tied to that mission. But so that was Europeans. Fast forward a few months, going into Pans, I think I only competed like one time before Pans.
Yeah.
Just because of the way the brackets were, like it was just hard for me to find anyone to fight. The weight cut and just the energy around Pans was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Coming out of that injury and having to recondition myself and fast because I only really started being able to, I felt like I could move well, like at the end of January. And Pan Ams was in March. So it was coming fast and I was not like, I wanted to do Pans, of course, because it's like now my mission is back, but I was not feeling good day to day. I was not happy. But I do know what I love, and I love jiu-jitsu. So since I have that path, I just like, keep going down that path. Fast forward to Pan Ams, my first fight didn't show up. So I went straight to the finals. And I lost that final by a penalty that I received. And I don't say this story for pity. I say this story just as kind of like
setting the stage
to explain how weird of a place I was in. So I lost this final fight by a penalty that I received for pointing to my opponent's reap. So like in theory, like, she should have gotten the penalty. You know, if what I was pointing to was correct. But because I saw them put up a penalty, I thought they gave it to her.
Yeah,
so I actually thought that I won the fight.
Mm.
I thought I was up a penalty, not down a penalty. And I don't say this, I really, like, I'm not saying this for pity. I think but it's exactly what should have happened.
Yeah.
Right when the time was done and I looked up and I realized I heard her team cheering, and I realized I looked up and my professor was just the most, like, shocked gasp, and I was trying to say to him through, like, you know, from the space, like, I thought I won, like, I thought I won, and then he just kind of put his arms up, and that, like, that whole day, I just kept thinking, oh, I'm so stupid. How could I fight in a way to where I thought I was winning? I thought I was up and then I was playing it too safe. That isn't me. Playing it safe isn't me. Because what happened is, like, I felt like I was winning the fight. So I kind of just, you know, wasn't in, like, fully, like, in gear. But now looking back, I just see I was detached from what I was doing. I was just trying to, like, win for the sake of winning, not just doing for the sake of, like, doing, which is why I do jiu-jitsu, because I love jiu-jitsu and that's what I love to do. I don't actually really care about winning or losing. I always say to myself and, like, to the people around me that if I lose, it's because, like, I had a lesson to learn. Like, it doesn't really affect me that much, but that affected me not for the actual loss, but how hard I was on myself for
making a mistake.
Yeah, once I recognized that once I recognized, like, where I was, and I was like, oh, that wasn't me fighting my best. I was so mad at myself for not, like, fighting my best. I was so upset. And so that's kind of, like, I feel like that was the lesson of Pans. Like, why are you so mad at yourself for making the mistake? It's okay. And the mistake goes past the call. It just kind of went into me not giving, like, I always say to the kids that I teach, like, just full effort is what matters. And I tell them, I can see when you're giving that effort, and I can see when you're not. So to look back at that footage
and know it within yourself, like, I did not give my full effort. That is a really hard place to be in, to look at.
It's really hard, especially because I preach to my students that you should be giving your full effort. And I'm not mad at them if they don't. I just want them to do better. But it's like, okay, can I look at myself? Can I open up the laptop, look at Flow Grappling, watch the fight?
It's hard to watch too. It's not always hard to watch when you've lost, but for me, it's hard to watch when I know I didn't give my best. When I look back on old performances and I'm like, oh, I got kind of complacent there. Oh, I was, like, respecting them way too much and not giving my, like, then it's, like, hard for me to watch because I'm like, oh no, like, I'm not that version of me anymore. But then having compassion for that girl too, and being like, oh, I'm not her anymore, but I love you. Like, you made me who I am, but, like, we don't need to do that again. Is, like, it's really important to be able to look that stuff in the face and not shy away from it.
And I've always been someone who loves to watch competition footage. Like, I watch it. I watch my competition footage, like, 10, 20, 30 times.
Oh my God.
Not all in one day, but just to build, because I just love comparing one performance to another and, like, building between that. That's just, like, what, like, lights me up.
That's so funny because I'm the opposite. I hate watching my own competition footage. It doesn't matter if I, like, smashed it and won. I don't like watching. I'll watch it with my coach to, like, dissect what needs to be addressed. But I don't know if it's because I just feel like I know that you feel this way too, or I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like you feel this way too, but maybe it expresses itself differently, where, like, I look back on a version and I'm like, I'm definitely not that. Like, every day I'm like, oh, like, I evolved into, like, I don't even know her. Like, a week ago, like, Kendall a week ago, I'm like, I don't even, there's this essence of, like, the soul that is me. Like, if I zoomed out and I, like, watched Kendall from down below, right? Like, here in my physical body, if, like, my little soul zoomed out and looked down on us right here, right now, I can see this physical body. And then in a week, maybe the soul is the same that zooms out, but the physical body, like, what's going on here on earth is different, right? To get, like, super woo woo for a second. Totally. But the match footage for me is the same. Whereas, like, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know that girl. But for some reason, like, maybe for you, it's fun to watch the evolution of it. For me, I'm like, I don't know how to explain. I'm like, no, I don't want to watch it. I don't know her anymore. Like, I don't, what's happening today? Like, maybe it's because too, like, I'm so committed to being whatever comes next after her that, like, I don't know. It's something to explore. I have resistance to it though, for sure. Yeah. Like, I don't want to watch it.
I do too. And that's why, like, I really just love to, like, lean into it. I I mean, we all choose like what type of resistance we want to like dissolve. And for me, that seems to be like a really powerful hurdle
Tool,
to jump. And I feel like when I am watching my competition footage, I can very easily go into like critique of like who she was, but I also have to realize whoever that person was there, like there's no guarantee that maybe some of that, I would say with that particular fight, it was okay. let me go back. When I say giving full effort, it's really easy for people to think that means like trying your best.
Right.
But in the moment, you're never thinking you're not trying your best.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do catch yourself thinking, "Oh, I'm not trying my best," and you don't immediately correct it, then you're actually just perpetuating the not trying of your best, and then you're kind of digging yourself into a hole. So, all that to say, when I am like watching my competition footage and I can see points where I'm like not giving my best, I know that if I am watching this and I just don't, and I'm not letting her not give her best, then the next time I'm training or competing and I find myself feeling like, oh, let's turn back on, I'm not there, I'm going to get mad at myself in that moment for not turning back on. So it's like I'm trying to like kind of do some like side work before I'm actually training.
It's like a forcing system,
Yeah, because I need to be able to watch that footage and think, that's okay that you had a moment. Like, let's just get back into it. Like, let's build up that pace again. And even if I know in that fight I didn't, it's like, well, I know I feel it in myself right now, like getting that energy back and kind of building that pace back up. But when it comes to giving full effort, a lot of the time, my kids, like the students that I teach, little kids, like 6-year-olds, they get confused because they say, "Oh, Professor Shelby, I'm always trying my best," but distractions of like respecting your opponent too much or feeling afraid of losing or getting tired, those are all distractions from full effort. So it's really, it's not just like, oh, if you're doing badly, if you're losing, you're not giving effort. It's like, just what is the intention like behind that?
Yeah. So when you're watching the footage, it's like a version of training because you're like pre-training the response, the emotional response you're going to have to watching the thing or feeling the thing or experience the thing, so that when you go into training, it's not the first, like you're getting more reps in rather than only doing it in training or competition. Did you feel like you had pressure, and you may have already been planning to mention this, but did you feel like you had pressure after Pans, after that loss, going into the tournaments to come, and obviously Worlds following soon after, of thinking it might be your last brown belt season?
Well, for the past, so around the time I was like 15, if they listen to the first part, they already know this is when I kind of like really dug in and decided jiu-jitsu is what I'm doing. And when I started to kind of explore that more and think, oh, what does that mean? What's that mean to win your rookie year at black belt? Like, who's done that? What does that feel like? Like, just kind of getting more into, oh, like, what is a grand slam? Like, do I want a grand slam? Like, just different questions that I never really explored. Really quickly, I was like, I want to win brown belt worlds and get my black belt like right after that on the podium. I said that, like, and that's what happened. But I didn't know that was going to happen at all, but I've been kind of like in that, I've been wanting that for years. That's been very also, this is like very nuanced, but like probably if you aren't in the IBJJF circuit, people wouldn't really understand this, but when you win brown belt worlds, you don't need any points to qualify for black belt worlds. So usually black belts need to like compete a little bit to like qualify for black belt worlds. But if you win at brown belt,
you're automatically.
So the concept in my mind of having that and being able to go into worlds with no points, which of course I'm not actually going to go into worlds with no points. Like, I love to compete, but just the idea, captivated me like no other for years. The thought that winning brown belt worlds and not needing points to go into your black belt. So that right after I lost Pans, I said, okay, like, that's okay because I'm winning worlds. Like, I knew that's all that mattered to me. And really for like the first 6 months, that is all that mattered. When I was trying to do all my like equations of like, oh, if I don't do Europeans, like, where can I fight this girl, that it's all just centered around and what makes me win worlds. The year before at purple belt, I won Europeans, Pans, worlds. So I was kind of used to that, I guess, like winning tournaments leading up to my world titles. So I didn't have that this time, but the foundation that I built from Pans to worlds just refinding my center and like just reinvigorating my love for what I do. Jujitsu, just like, everything that like I want to do like every day, kind of reminded me that like the goal of worlds is there, but I'm not afraid of anything that means. I'm not afraid of losing worlds. I'm not afraid of winning worlds. I'm not afraid of not getting promoted. Like, I don't care. I'm just doing what I love.
So how do you balance putting the thing on the pedestal as far as like winning worlds and having that be shiny, and then being able to enter black belt worlds with no points and all this stuff and having passion around that? How do you have that be so intense and have the, but I don't care if I lose, or I'm not afraid of what happens at worlds? Because having like a big shiny thing like that, in my opinion, for goal setting is important. Like when you think about the why, because if you have a strong enough why, we've heard that before, if your why is strong enough, you'll figure out the how. So then you're motivated to do all the hard, really difficult things that you're doing every day that get you to the shiny thing. So how do you balance having the big enough why to make the how possible, because the how is very difficult, while also not putting the pressure on yourself of needing to get the shiny thing? Because a lot of times what happens to people, and this used to happen to me, is you make the shiny thing so important so that the how is unquestionable. You're going to do anything that it takes, right? But for me, when I was younger or in past years, then if I got to the shiny thing and I didn't get it and I didn't win, then it felt like all the how was not worth it. It was a waste of time because I didn't get the why. I didn't get the whole purpose around it. For me was to get that thing. So you don't get that thing, then why did I do all that stuff? Right? So how do you balance that when this is something you've been dreaming of since you were 15?
Yeah, so this kind of, I take it back to the kids that I teach, because teaching is such a big part of my life. And it actually, in recent years, as my little babies have grown up a little more, and they're competing all the time. They all went to Penn Kids. Like, we had a few wins at Penn Kids of my students. They're competing all the time. They're competing tomorrow. They, like, in the past year, they've gotten really big on competing, and I've been, the person leading them into that with them at every tournament. So a lot of this kind of just goes back to the stuff that I would tell them and the stuff that I see from them. So when I was in between Pans and Worlds and I was trying to figure out, I was like, about a week after Pans, life just started to go downhill, as in like I was like, it was just not even related to Pans, because I was like, all right, next thing, like, let's get Pans out of the way, like, let's go to the next thing. But I was training with this energy of just like being miserable. I wasn't happy. Like, it was just like, because Pans didn't work out, now let's go to Worlds so it works out, so I'm happy. So that week was
skipping the emotional discomfort, and like how quickly can I get back into feeling good
totally
again?
Trying to skip the
bypass the whole
totally,
which is normal, and it's what most of us try to do. It's the same thing with the injury. Like, I don't want to experience the emotional discomfort of realizing my goalpost now has to change, and so I'm just going to do whatever I can in the day-to-day to like bypass that emotional experience and just be like, okay, well, now this is my goal, and now this is and like get back into the energy that I'm used to, that I'm comfortable with, right? How can I get back to comfort and to like what feels like Kendall to me, when in fact, like, what Kendall is shifting in this moment if I allow the emotional discomfort to allow me to have a new experience. So you weren't doing that at first, but then what happened?
But then about a week after, every day was just getting worse and worse. Don't want to go into details. Just imagine your worst day. And it's like that for like 7 days in a row. And about day 7, I seriously went, wow, I need to completely change as a person, and basically flipped a switch that guided me into Worlds. And that switch, very basically, I will say, was just about, it was centered around wanting to do well at Worlds. That was a motivation to do this work. The work needed to be done, and it's always easier to have a goal to do the work, right? So I knew that the only way I would win Worlds is if I was enjoying my life. And if I was not enjoying my life, I would not win Worlds. So because I'd spent all these years wanting to win Worlds, I knew that if I wanted that, I had to enjoy my life. So it's like, wow, I'm really not enjoying my life. Now I need to figure out how to enjoy my life.
So what's interesting is like what you've been able to do is you pick the goalpost that simultaneously, like, it's telling you, okay, I need to enjoy my life. That's the easiest chance or the best chance or the most likely chance I have at attaining this thing that I want to attain. But it also simultaneously is the thing that gives you the best shot at your personal development, at your growth. And so when we talk about, like, I think you may have, or maybe you still have it in your Instagram bio, and you and I have talked about it a lot, of like, my jujitsu is a conduit of like making myself better. Like, and people say self-improvement a lot, but also achieving something greater, being something greater for other people, like just finding my purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really less about winning the world, even though that can be a great marker to say, like, okay, winning the world is this thing. What do I need to do to become the person that can win worlds? And I know you're going to talk about that too, because we've talked about it before. But what do I need to do to become that person, right? Now, it just so happens that I think what many successful people do is what they need to do to become that person is also the same thing they need to be do just to elevate their lives in general inside. Like, so it's just, I want to mention that before you go into the process of actually doing it, because yes, what you did and all the work you did helped you win worlds, but more than that, it helped you become the person that you want to be. It just so happens that you pick goals that align with that. So the person who you became that you want to be, that you're still, of course, and like to be continued every day, is the person that could achieve the thing. But if we can find a way, I think this is a challenge for many of us. Like, how do you choose your goals, right? People ask that question a lot. Like, well, what do I choose? Like, do I choose competing? Do I choose like being a great mom? Do I choose this thing at work? Well, it really comes down to like, who is the person you think that can achieve that thing that you want to achieve? And does that align with who you want to be on a daily basis and who you want to become?
Right? Yeah. And on that note, I find as an advocate for jiu-jitsu that if you like, you can't always have such tangible goals. If you're thinking, oh, I want to be a great mom, it's hard. Like, you can't find, you can on a day-to-day basis think, oh, I'm doing this and I know that was better than I did the day before. But it's harder for more abstract goals like, oh, I want to be happy, or I want to be a good daughter, like those types of questions. There's no real like, oh, do I have a medal in my face to see if I got closer to that thing?
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure it's like, as you deep dive into other topics, right? Like, you and I both as non-mothers, I'm sure that like a mom could listen to this and be like, no, there are, and we're just not saying what they are. But I think the concept you're pointing out is important, rather than saying like, I'm a good mom. It'd be picking something tangible that has to do with motherhood. Or like, same with jiu-jitsu though. It's not like, oh, I want to get better at jiu-jitsu. I want to be good at jiu-jitsu. What does that mean?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it doesn't have to be winning a competition. It can be other stuff, but it has to be something that's tangible, or there's nothing to measure.
Yeah. And I think when you have something tangible to measure in one part of your life, it's going to reflect that in all the other ones too. So that's why I think like even someone who is on a quest to, well, I don't want to keep saying better mom, because we are not moms. We're so underqualified. Like, just,
so you say like being a good friend,
being
like, or being a good partner, like a romantic partner. Like, there's so many things that you and I try to be, but if you plug a tangible thing into it, it's easier to measure. Yeah.
And I also think that because jiu-jitsu is just one part of your life, if you have that gold medal in your face and you did do that tangible thing, it's also going to affect the other parts of your life. If you did that preparation in the way that was for self-exploration and not just for like a need to win or like a want to win. So when I had that gold medal at Worlds,
well, really, sorry to interrupt. The important distinction though is the wanting to win is, in that case, if you're not doing the self-development to get to the thing that gives you the goal, like if you're off the path of what we're talking about, then really the want to win is not a want to win. Totally. It's a fear of losing.
Exactly. Yes. It's like, I love that.
Like, it's actually the opposite. The drive, the want, the excitement about winning is what, in my experience and what I'm mirroring in your experience, is the thing that motivates you to do all the work that helps you become the person who gets it. In my personal experience, when I've been the person that thought what I wanted was to win, but really it was a fear. It was fear-based. It was, if I don't get this, then what does that mean about me? Am I not good enough? Do I not measure up? Is my work not worth its time if I don't get X, Y, or Z? So really, it's like we're using the same word, oh, want to win, and what's the reason? But in my experience, it's actually two completely different emotional experiences with the goal itself. So anyway, so it sounds like as long as you're in the, like, you kind of you can use positive versus negative, but I mostly mean energy, like positive energy driving you to something versus negative fear-based energy driving you to something. As long as you're in the positive base, then you're going to have that self-exploration process or that personal development process. It's inevitable.
Yeah. And I think that's also, like, if someone's listening, it can get a little bit confusing if we're using the same words to describe two totally different processes. But I think that is so common in like just our everyday, the way we interact. Like, we're always no one knows what we actually mean when we're using any words. So it's like just saying like the want to win.
Chris
like,
always uses the thing private language. Have you heard him say that? No, there's this, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this on a podcast, but it's just like, I don't know, I forgot where he even read it from, but him and his brother Steve always use this like phrase, like, oh, private language. Like when I say the word happy, I have no idea what you think happy means. Like I literally have no idea. And like we are using our own private language with it. It's an amazing thing that we communicate as well as we do as human beings, because we have no idea if we're understanding each other at all. Like if you really, I don't want to spend too much time thinking about that because it gives me like such a mind fuck. But if you really think about it, you're like, oh my God, do I even know anybody?
Like, do I only know people through my lens? Yeah, through my vocabulary,
my private language. Like it is private language. So anyway, going back to what you said, it's like the goal thing. Using the word goal is very much private language, I think, because a goal can be something, again, that's like positive. You're striving, it's exciting, it's motivating, or it can be fear-based, right? Totally. And to me, those are two different things. And I've experienced both of them vastly. Like I'm definitely not above the fear-based one, but I do have a little bit more awareness now, or sometimes I forget and then I remember again and then I forget and then I remember again, or I'm like in the dark and then I'm in the light and like I can see, you know that whole process that we never stop going through. But I'll recognize like, wait a second, I put that on my goal list or like as a thing I wanted to do really because of fear. Was it financial insecurity? Was it self-importance? Was it validation? Like, was it not being loved? Was it being alone? Like all of those things. Why did I actually put that on that list? Because it wasn't out of love. It was out of fear. So yes, when we use the word goal, we need to keep in mind that like we're talking about two different ideas.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But it was a positive idea for you is what we're hearing. So what work did you actually get into after that horrible week?
So my mom gave me a bunch of Joe Dispenza books and she was like, I listened to this guy on a podcast, like read a book. So
that's how I started listening to Joe too, was from Lewis Howes.
Funny.
But my mom had told me about him so many times. She was like sending me links. She's like, you need to listen to this. Just listen to this. Just listen to this. And I was like, oh my God, Mom, you send me people and things like all the time. Then I listened to the podcast of him on Lewis Howes and I was obsessed. So how funny that it both came from our moms.
Yeah, and it's so funny.
We have good moms.
Yeah. And I didn't even realize you were into
only one. Right.
I started, so I picked up one of those books. She bought like all of Joe Dispenza's books. I picked up whichever one like kind of felt right.
Yeah.
And a few pages in, I was like, wait, is this the guy that Kendall went to the retreat? And it was, and I voice memoed you, like right after I finished like meditating one day, and I was like, this is so weird. Yeah. Anyway, so I had never really done any like meditation or like mindfulness work at all, or like I thought I did, but compared to what I've done now, I did nothing. But basically, like after the first day that I just kind of sat down and spent like 10-15 minutes like clearing my mind and getting to a place of like stillness and center, I realized, oh wait, where I'm here right now is the same place that I am when I'm training and I'm at my very best, or I'm competing and I'm at my very best.
Like a flow state, right?
Yeah.
People use the word flow state a lot.
Yeah, and that was kind of shocking to me because I didn't fully realize that it was a choice to get there. It was kind of just random. It was like, oh, I either have a good competition day or a bad competition day. Of course, I can attribute good or bad to factors leading up to it. Like I could say I had a bad hand experience because of injury leading up to it, or like just lack of experience. And that's why I wasn't able to get into the flow. But it's like, if I'm just sitting here meditating and I can get into the flow, it's like, it's not that far away.
Right, so, right. Yeah, the flow state's always available to us.
Yeah, so to realize like, oh wait, I can just access this through doing nothing. That was really weird to me because I would always think I have to do something to get somewhere. But to close my eyes and do physically nothing and to get into flow actually like changed my entire life. And I think it's going to change the trajectory of my entire life because now I see that exercise of getting into flow. Like people say they use jiu-jitsu for meditation purposes, and I never understood that because I started when I was a kid and it was always just so rough and tumble and it wasn't something that I joined out of a need for some inner peace or like nothing like that. I was just a kid. So growing up and becoming an adult who's now doing this thing that other adults use for purposes that I've never even thought about changed my entire lens of jiu-jitsu and myself. and realize, oh, the reason I'm doing this is so much bigger than I thought it was before. It's
But
really,
you've never really been without it, so you didn't know that you needed it, but now it's such a part of your life. And then especially all that time injured and not being able to access that, it's like you don't really know what's missing until it's gone a lot of the time.
Yeah. So it's as if I think like we need to be in that flow state. We need to get there for me to stay sane. I thought the only way a human gets there is by training well.
Right.
And I would feel good about myself if I was training or competing well. But the only way that I'd train or compete well is if I was in the flow state, that feeling. But then,
and it felt like it was happening outside of your control. So it's just almost like a numbers game. It's like, if I just keep training, then I'll get enough flow sessions in. And then hopefully if I do that enough, then I'll show up on competition day and I'll get it. But now you're sitting still in your room or at the beach or whatever. And you're like, wait, I can access this all the time as long as I'm intentional around it. So you start doing this work, and then that's what, like 2 months away from Worlds. What were you doing on a daily basis? Like, did you start having to practice this regularly? Was it before training, after training?
Yeah, I was doing this basically, I would meditate for like 10 to 45 minutes every day, like after I would train. And so I did that for about like 3 or 4 weeks. I was feeling good. Just starting to feel good again. That's the only way to say it. Like, I'll keep it simple. Just feeling like myself again. And then I got hurt again, my neck. So then I was basically out of training for like 2-3 weeks again.
So really close to Worlds too.
Yeah. So I really only had like 3 weeks to train before Worlds. So I had 3 total weeks and then like went into Worlds. But that time that I was like injured again, like I don't like to keep referring to injury again and again because it feels so repetitive. It feels so like heavy and like dense. But really, let's just say like not in a state, like I couldn't train. Okay, I couldn't train. So I couldn't train for like 2-3 weeks. And usually I would just spiral every time that would happen. But this time I really just went a lot deeper, and I realized, oh, if I don't, maybe I can't do Worlds. I don't know. And how would that make me feel? And I thought I'd feel okay with that. And then it's like, well, how would you feel if you if I am able to do Worlds? It's like, well, I'm happier with that option, but I'm not so miserable without it. So realizing
you drop the need or the attachment to the thing.
Yeah, because I couldn't even know if I didn't know if I was going to be able to compete at Worlds.
Right.
And that thought used to freak me out. But feeling the energy of that being okay was like, hold on. Like, I can just be happy right now today. Even if Worlds never exists, even if Worlds never comes. And people would probably say that if you're not training like 5 weeks out from the biggest tournament of the year, like, good luck. And that's never something I'd done before. I really only had like a 3-week camp, like what you call it. I couldn't even like run or do much cardio because like the movement hurt my neck. So like traditionally that would be horrible, and you'd be going into Worlds afraid, like just absolutely terrified,
feeling
like,
unprepared.
But I felt more prepared than I ever had before. And when I was able to step on the mat again, I was feeling better every day. I was just unlocking like this new part of me. And this is going back to like 20 or 30 minutes ago, probably a question that you asked. But the game became priming myself for the best possible performance. So I told myself every day, I don't care what hardship is going to come up. Whatever I'm doing, like, give it to me as hard as it needs to come. If it's going to result in me giving the best performance of my life at Worlds. And that was a direct response to me feeling like I didn't perform well at Pans. Past wins, past losses. I didn't feel like I did what I know I can do. So Worlds just kind of became, to me, I stopped caring about the result. And just how am I going to prime myself for the best possible performance?
It's a new stage, a new opportunity to set the stage and have your performance. And what's interesting when you say that is like, many times when we're going, like speaking for myself, going into a big competition like ACC, Worlds, Pan Ams, these big events, every training session you go in, you're trying to beat everybody, because the idea is that if I beat everybody up and tap everybody out and then I get to Worlds, then like I'm in good shape. And that means that I can win because look what I did in the room. When in reality, what you're saying sounds to me like something totally different. It's actually like, wait, no, give me the hardest challenges. Like give me the best opportunities that like rip me apart and open me up and force me to a new level of exploration of performance, because we know that we get our best performances if if you're in this state, you can get your best performance when you are like shoved into the fire.
Totally.
Once you're shoved in the fire, like if you're open to it, then you are allowed this opportunity to like really bring something out of yourself that you haven't seen before. Whereas if you're in that comfort zone, not to say it's not hard to go in and train hard and tap everyone out. That's a different kind of hard, but it's still hard. It's like very physically demanding. It's mentally demanding, but you don't have to go into the fire all the time for that. Or it's like you're kind of in like the baby flames, So it's like, I love the distinction between actually I was going into the training saying, give me everything you got, like rip me apart, give me every opportunity for me to show what I'm made of, so that gives me the best opportunity to go into the Worlds on a new stage and show what I have to offer, rather than being prepped just to win.
And you even saying showing what you have to offer could go back into like the semantics of what you said about private language. Because in the past, showing what I have to offer was to prove something. But this just became completely about, at least consciously, what I viewed it as, is I'm going to go into Worlds giving the best that I've ever given to show people, to show my students, just anyone around me who could benefit from seeing something like that you can do anything. Because if I can do it, you can do it. That's what it totally became. Like, I want to perform really well, because if I can do it, then you can do it. And really mainly saying that to my students who are just, they're so young, they're forming like their brain, like every day they're different. Like every day they are growing and like just finding themselves. And I just really wanted to be able to show them, even when it's hard, like you go out and you can do anything. And just saying that's like anyone who follows me, like my immediate family, extended friends, like anyone, it was just, I really felt like I was carrying the energy of my whole like tribe. Like I was like, guys, look, like look at me, because you can do the same thing. And like we're supporting each other, and I can do it and you can too. So actual like day of Worlds, most like probably craziest day of my life. I had 3 fights and I submitted 2 of those fights, and I think I had no points scored against me. I'm pretty sure. My first fight, my first fight, I fought someone who I actually like had fought a few times before that. And it was about maybe like 4 or 5 minutes into the fight that I actually got caught in an armbar. And I was so caught in this armbar that I had my hand up to tap.
Oh my God.
Oh, it was horrible.
Oh,
it was cracking and popping. My arm was completely extended.
Oh my gosh.
And at this point, it was like I was fighting against, it was like as if there was no girl in front of me. It was like just me. I was fighting against all of these thoughts that were plaguing me about like, maybe it is just okay to lose. Maybe you did already try your best. The preparation is the lesson you learned. These are thoughts that I remember having as my arm was extended. In real time, probably like 4 seconds, but in my head, an eternity. And these thoughts just kept coming, and it was like just me thinking like, okay, maybe the lesson, just any work that I tried to do being undone. So if I told myself, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to perform my best, then it was like, oh, well, maybe like the preparation was you performing your best. Everything that I thought to myself was being undone. It was like just a complete unwinding. And my arm is extended, and you can see, you might have to clip this in because it looks crazy. My mouth is like wide open, and I'm just like purging. That's how, like, just purging this energy. That's how it feels. Like, it looks like I'm about to die. And when I look back at this, it looks like I'm about to die. And it felt like I was about to die, because I know I have all these eyes on me, and I said I was going to perform my best, but now my arm is extended. Like, I was up in the fight, but I'm like, I don't even care if I'm up in the fight. I'm going to have to tap. It's all over. It's all going to be over. I have my hand up to tap, and then it's just like I died. Something died, and I was there. And you just see it, even talking about it, like it makes my heart, like, it's so hard to explain in words, but like you just have to add the clip because it's crazy.
We will.
My hand's up to tap and it switches to where I grip the pants and I just like Hail Mary pull my arm out and immediately pass her guard and go straight to a submission.
Wow, that's
and
wild.
I was like about to cry after that fight. I was looking and my mom and my dad were looking at me with tears in their eyes because they knew what that meant. And right after that happened, when I had that like death and I just kind of like came out of that, I said, oh, this is mine. No, none of those thoughts are going to plague me for these next 2 fights. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
And I was just, it was like that was the last thing I needed to really like clear all that out of me. And I turned that tap into a grip. I pulled the grip and I pulled my arm out and went straight like past her guard like within those 3 seconds. So then I had my second fight. My third fight was against the girl that I lost to at Pans, which was like
the weird penalty match.
Which I was so excited about. I was hoping the bracket would turn out that way. But I also didn't really care because, I was just so involved in like the present moment. I was like, I don't care how the bracket unfolds, but I would love to fight her again. And I just went into that fight as that like reborn self. I don't know how else to explain it. I shook the hands, which this is kind of another thing. I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but it really resonates with me so much. When I was younger and I would see that people would get 3 refs for finals of like big tournaments. All I wanted was 3 refs. That's all I wanted. It meant so much to me. So when I won my first world title and I had those 3 refs, it was just like a light was like, I was just like shaking the hands, running, and I just felt the energy of like my professors, like every good black belt in the world, like everyone who's ever won a world title, just the energy of that as I'm going to shake the hands. And I was just like, I just love this. And I ended up, I think, submitting her in like 3 minutes. Like I went through, it was like maybe 8-0, 10-0, something, like some high, racked up a score and got the submission. And I looked up and I was like, oh, I did it. And it was kind of like the consciousness came back to me. I was like, oh, that's the thing I wanted to do. I just did it. And of course, right after that, I actually got asked by someone like, how do you feel? And I literally said, oh, I feel like a black belt. Not knowing I was going to get my black belt. And then a few minutes later, I go up to the podium and I get my black belt. And I mean, I just knew. I already knew that I was a black belt. I was fighting like a black belt. That's what it means to me, to fight like a black belt. So that was kind of like the day of worlds, which is why I think that jiu-jitsu is just the best way that a person who's drawn to it can develop and can become a better person. Because I have that day and I have this medal and I have this footage that shows 20 or 19 at the time, 19 years of work leading up to that moment and like everything I was at that moment.
Ooh, wow. Yeah, we're going to clip in the part of the armbar because that's so intense. And I have moments of myself too, where I can like look back at footage and you really, really see like a big psychological shift happen within yourself. And like, what a privilege to be able to see that on a camera, right? It's such a fun experience. So, okay. So going into the podium, you get your black belt. And one of the things that I remember you talking about before off camera was like, you became the person who fought like a black belt before you actually proved it to yourself, or kind of in the process of worlds, like you became the person moving up. So now moving forward, because we're going to wrap up today's episode and then we'll talk about more in part 3 because we'll have you back. What does it mean to you right now to be living like a black belt and training like a black belt and competing like a black belt? Is it anything different than what you just said that day? Or obviously, when I ask you in a year or 2 years, like there's more maturity that comes with time and experience. But right now, what does that feel like to you?
So it's very similar to that day. And I feel like actually what happened is the few weeks right after Worlds was a total revert. Like I totally went back in my mindset, my process, and I thought, oh, I lost it. I had something so good and I lost it. But even the thought of thinking that I lost it is the problem. Like that thought that I lost it, that's what I need to lose. You know what I mean?
Well, it's kind of going back again, like after big events, like it's very normal to have these big emotional upswings. And like for me, I know it's important to have people around me that understand me really well. Like my mom's one of those people for me where like after I compete, like there is a big emotional process, whether you win or lose, right? There's actually a documentary that's really sad about that, but it's about like Olympic athletes and like post-Olympic depression and stuff. So you just have this huge, amazing event. You
That's
have
real. That's really real. I think every title I've ever got has that to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, you literally, you're like, I had an ego death in the competition, like while I'm getting armbarred. So like, there's a lot to process here, right?
Yeah,
so, but
no, for sure.
But you get out of the event, and I know that you had an event that you competed in after that, but it still is not the same magnitude that Worlds holds in a lot of ways. And so when you have this giant thing where you wake up and you have a mission every day and you're on mission and you're on purpose, and then that thing kind of goes away. It's not to say like there are some people, especially in the athletic space, where their whole life revolves around one tournament and then that's it. And then so after that, their purpose is they don't feel like they're not sure what the purpose is. And there's a lot of chemical things happening with like your serotonin and your dopamine and all that. But with you, I know that you had something on the calendar soon after, and you went to Japan and you competed and you won, but it's still not the same magnitude of World. So how did you manage like those experiences right after, feeling like the mission was like gone, completed, checked off the list, and all of a sudden, like all I have today is my 24 hours, like whatever time it is, like I woke up at 7:00 this morning until then, like those are the only hours I have. Like what I did yesterday was really cool. I don't want to discount that. Like it's part of who I am. But at the same time, like all I have right now is the present moment today. So was that difficult? Was it hard at first and then you liked it? Or like, what was your process after?
Well, I always get kind of that similar experience with, like post-Olympics depression type thing after like I get a new belt. It's always been like that. So to have Worlds plus the black belt at the same time felt like a lot. Definitely a lot more than I ever had before, but I felt more equipped than ever to handle it. I think that
the heightened just want to mention too, like especially for listeners, like heightened states are beautiful. One thing that I've had to learn as a person who comes by extremes really naturally is that like, who am I to expect that I'm supposed to stay at these heightened states all the time? Because if I force myself to try to stay in this heightened state, like what goes up must come down. Like I'm going to have a hard backswing if I expect myself to stay in that heightened state at all time. Like, so instead it's like, if I can go up to the heightened state and prepare myself to kind of come back to neutral again without having to dip way low into the like really depleted state. And there are tangible ways you can do that. Like one of the things for me is like, again, being able to talk things through with people who know me really well, not be like openly vulnerable about those emotions, like publicly too early, like allow myself like the privacy, the respect, the space to do that with people. Like that kind of stuff, or just activities like doing stuff that's non-jiu-jitsu related, like going to the beach, if you're a Disneyland person, like whatever it is, right? Like how can we set ourselves up for success in coming back to neutral rather than dipping super low? And that can be really difficult. But again, not having the delusional expectation, speaking from myself, that it's like, oh, I feel this high, I'm going to feel this good all the time, because it's not natural for us to stay there all the time. But in my mind, for many years, it was like either that or super, super low. So if I didn't have the high, I thought something was wrong with me. And then feeling like something was wrong with me perpetuated the experience of spiraling downward, when in actuality, like a lot of it is coming back to like, how can I just feel grounded today? Enjoy the highs for what they are. And also like the lows, like let them be what they are. Don't make the pendulum swing more extreme than it needs to be. So you start coming down after the big upswing. And did you go down super far, or did you kind of dip and then you're able to come back up to neutral again?
Honestly, I would say that because I was so quickly going in to compete, like 4 weeks after that, I kind of was able to just, okay, there's another tournament. So like there's
caught
another
yourself
goal.
from going down.
Really, I feel like I experienced that after Japan.
I see. Yeah.
So the down, and it wasn't as harsh as it ever had been before because I had more awareness. But yeah, after that, realizing, okay, well now I did Japan. Like, well, do I want to do another thing? And I remember being in the bleachers. I had just finished fighting. Like I had my medal, and I went up to the bleachers and I was like looking at the registrations for the next tournament. And then I was like,
move the goalpost. Right.
And I was like, this doesn't feel good. Like it does not feel good.
Why
to
can't
have
I
my
sit still?
phone out and do this? Like I'm gonna put my phone down. So really, and these past few weeks have just been about, because that was in June. So it's like then that was in July, and then now it's like August. So I'd say these past like month and a half has been about just coming back to that center that I went to with World, which was what's going to support me being happy today. So what you were saying, you had a question before that question.
Yeah.
And I can't paraphrase exactly what the question was, but I know what my answer is to it. And it's just like playing the game, whatever game you want to play, just because you like to play a game. Like, I just like to play. Like, we're just humans and we just like to play games.
Yeah. Like the digging for the digging, like we were talking about.
Yeah, and
earlier.
I happen to really feel like jiu-jitsu is that game. And after Worlds, because of that big high and then that crash, or more after, like, you know, like in the past month or whatever, I've thought like, oh, do I want to play a different game? Do I want to do less jiu-jitsu? But then I really realized when I was just centered in myself and what I want to do every day, I was like, oh, this is the game I want to play. And maybe that changes tomorrow. But really just treating jiu-jitsu like a game has made me so happy. And that's how I went into Worlds too. So it's like we're just playing a game. Like if I tell my students to spar, or I have them play like tag, those are both two games. Like we make the first thing like not a game.
So serious.
Yeah,
right.
But it's a game.
It's a game. Yeah.
It's all like we're all just playing games.
Yeah.
So just to like kind of like feel into that and be like, we're just humans who likes to play games, and like I'm just playing a game. And that's yeah.
And going back to injuries and stuff too, if there's times where you can't play, like that really helps me think about it as like jiu-jitsu is a game, but I can play many other games.
Totally.
Like I can sit here and podcast, like this is a game.
Yeah.
How can I get better at this? How can I get great guests on? Like, or like any kinds of avenues, like, or we go back to like the etching, the circle thing. Like I don't need to stay in etching the same exact path. I can go and do another path and come back to that later. But minimizing it to like letting that be what it is, a path, a game, whatever you want to call it, an avenue, takes the pressure off of having to stay in just that one, or in it needing to look like a certain thing. So, okay. So we're going to come back for episode 3 shortly here. But before we wrap up episode 2 or part 2 of your series, I want to ask you the question we always ask. And what does it feel like you today to you today to have a grip on your life?
I really think it's about like what I was just saying, like playing whatever game I want to play. But without like, we've used the words like playing a game so much that they kind of lose the meaning of like, oh, you want to have your game, your jiu-jitsu game, or you're training like to make your game better, or like, or even like you're playing someone, like I'm trying to like play, but it's like really just making like doing things that I want to do, but like without any serious connotation, like at all. Yeah. Because the less serious I make it, the more fun I'm having. And then that's how I went into Worlds. And then the more fun I'm having, the more I just can access presence easier. Like if we're not having fun, it's a lot harder to feel, like that we can be here. Because if we feel like we're not having fun, then we're trying to project ourselves into some future where we are having fun. Yeah. But if I'm just
I'll be happy when.
Yeah.
When I finish playing this game really well, then I'll be happy. And it's like, wait, now you're not even playing the game. Like,
Totally. But to get like really maybe weirdly specific, and this is very new to me in the past like few weeks. So this is like a very new thought. But when I'm training like it's not my job and I'm just training like to play the game, that being there is what it is to have a grip on my life right now. And I didn't really realize that because I started to turn jiu-jitsu into, like
serious.
Like a means to an end. Like I'm going to, win tournaments, make money, teach seminars. So right now, what it feels like in this very moment to have a grip on my life is when I get to train and I let all of those things go. Yeah. And I stop worrying so much about what this training means for my future. I'm just like, this is what I love. So doing jiu-jitsu has come in a lot of stages for me, but I would say there was a period of time where I started treating it more like work, and then now it's like I'm back into it just being a hobby while it still is my work, which I think is definitely a place I want to stay. Yeah. So as long as I can keep training and just keep enjoying training, enjoying when I'm losing, enjoying when I'm winning, enjoying just regaining that awareness. And anytime I can regain that awareness, I really feel like I have a good grip on what I'm doing. And that happens to be a lot of jiu-jitsu right now.
Yeah. Very good. Well, Shelby, thank you so much for your series, your series part 2, of your storied worlds and all the things that came with it. wow, it's really powerful and a lot of good stuff to think on later. I'm really, really excited for everyone to listen to this because some of the experiences I've been through, some of them I haven't been through, but I think many people will listen to this and not feel alone in their thoughts and experiences around competing and training, because we really are all having such a similar experience, whether you're winning the world or you're trying to win your local tournament or you're just trying to go in and perform well in your training, like, room, or whether you're trying to get a promotion at work, or like we said earlier, like be the good mom, like whatever tangible things you are plugging in for yourself. We all have a lot of the same experiences in different ways in different stages of our life. So thank you. So reminder, guys, that we don't have any ads on the podcast. So only thing I ask when you guys listen to it is if you got value of it, please share it. You can copy the link, send it to someone, share it on your story, share the clips as they come out. We'll release some reels of Shelby and I's conversation, but please, please, please share it and then rate it and review it. Leave a comment if it's YouTube, subscribe, all that good stuff, since we put it on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. So that would be awesome. And that's all I ask from you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. We will be back very soon with another fun episode. So make sure you guys stay subscribed so you get notified when it comes out, and we will see you shortly.